Hi, hello, g'day, kia ora, welcome to the studio. I'm Paula from MoxyMojo. Welcome to the flip through of my Dephemerember journal. I have completed all the prompts and have been sort of mulling over the journal for the last nearly month, and have been keeping it to myself. I'm sorry, because I just love it so much. But I do want to share with you what the final journal looks like. Now, I will probably, well, no, not probably, I might come back and do some more things in it. I don't know. I might leave it as it is, just as this is purely Dephemerember as it stands. I'm not 100% sure. It's one of those things where depends how I feel on the day, which I'm sure you understand. So here is the journal. This is our cover, which I did videos for the entire make of the journal, right from making the cover through to all the pages, all the ephemera that I made. The only things that I didn't film were where I realised that I'd forgotten to do something with the scraps from my swap partner, and I went back and added something to a prompt because I wanted to try and have some kind of scrap in there from Tanya for every prompt response. I think there are two that I just simply was not able to put something into them, so I've tried to do extra on some of the other prompts. And my apologies to Tanya for forgetting her. Sometimes I just got so into what I was doing that I completely forgot about adding those scraps. It was nothing personal. It was just me being in the moment. Sorry, darling. You know I love you. So this is my journal cover. It's got like a paper bag inside with fabric on both sides, inside and out, that is stitched into the paper bag or around the paper bag. I've got my stitching through because I love seeing the binding on the back. I'm not saying that I would never do a hidden binding journal, because I have done them and maybe I will do them again, but I love seeing the stitching. And like what I'm doing is, for all my Dephemerember journals, they've all got the same style of tag through a same style of eyelet, same font, same stamp, and then I've used the same thread for my bindings. Now, maybe I am a bit of a perfectionist, or maybe a bit OCD as far as that goes, but that's what I've chosen to do so far. Next year it could be different. Anyway, onto the front cover. So I used up some scraps of gauze, and this is threads from some paper that I'd pulled out, and then there's also this bit here under here. You can't really see a lot of it. Is some Halloween fabric that I dyed as well. I've got some ribbons in there, and these little wee bits here, these fluffy nondescript things with the stitching on them, hand stitching on them. That was some, you know how when you tear fabric apart, all those threads come out and they're really annoying and you don't know what to do with them. Well, I bundled them all up into little wee balls and then hand stitched them on, so that, because like the colour was a perfect match for here and for the papers, and so I thought, why not? My numbers were actually on the paper. That's why I printed it out, and then I have clear embossed on the top, and that is why they are shiny. And then gold splatters, because why not? Everybody loves gold. And you can see I had, before I tore the paper up, I added some distress ink and some distress oxide because it was printed on matte photo paper, and that gave me the oxidation but didn't remove the printed paper that I'd done. That makes sense. You really need to go and see the videos on how I made them, and I will put links to maybe the cover, but certainly I'm losing my words, the playlist for my Dephemerember journal is linked in the description box below, and so you can go and have a look there, because every single video that I made about Dephemerember is in that playlist. I promise you. Right, anyway, moving on, because we're already 7 minutes into this video. So I haven't done anything with the cover, but I love this fabric. I've used this before on other journals, which you may have seen if you've trolled through my channel at all, because there's something just sort of mildly psychedelic about it, and I just think it's so cool. And so that goes through to there, and I've got a pocket which we will get to in the back. The only thing I have noticed, and you can see on there, is if you are, well, maybe you can, I don't know if you can see it in the camera or not, but it's quite obvious. Oh, yep, there you go. Quite obvious in real life. The oxides are rubbing off onto the fabric. But I don't mind that. Yeah, you can see it here on the black as well. I really don't mind. But if you're not into that kind of thing, just be aware. So you might want to not put oxidized paper front and back. So anyway, this has got 4 signatures. There are 7 pages. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pages per signature. So that gave me plenty of real estate for my prompt responses and for anything else I wanted to do. Throughout the pages, I have done anything that was printed on photo paper. I did Louise's and Barbara's, okay, let's dip it in oxide and distress re-inkers and put that over the paper and dry it and see what we get with. Again, see my videos, because I go into a lot more detail and it will make a lot more sense. I've done some embossing on here, and that's glaze over texture paste, and it just feels so funky. Feels quite cool. And I'm definitely a textural person, whether it is visual texture or touchy texture. So we've got that in there. Love this page. In the end, I just could not cover up this page because I just thought it was so awesome. This was braille paper that I found in a second-hand shop, a resource centre. So it's not like I went and stole it off the Braille library or anything. I've done, again, texture paste, and this is embossing powder over the top. And again, it's really dimensional, which is quite appropriate for it being Braille paper. But I love the way that the ink's dispersed on this particular page. Just gorgeous. And the blue actually soaked through from the other side here, and you see the yellow coming through. I did not put any blue on there until I put it with here with when I did the embossing. So that has all soaked through, because obviously I put so much water in that in these Braille dots it soaked through, and I just love it. I probably could not replicate that if I tried, but you can guarantee I'm going to try, see if we can find a way to replicate it. So I didn't want to cut off any of these Braille pages, so they were sewn in to form pockets. So here was one of my first prompts, or it was actually one of my later prompts. And I kind of knew what I wanted to do, and that I wanted to have something interactive for this. And I just love the idea of looking like I was watering the garden for that mechanical garden thing. I wasn't sure how I was going to put it together before I started, but I love the way it turned out. And the big bonus for me was that I sketched these designs out, and I said to my husband, what are they? And he knew exactly what they were, so I'm going, yes, I must have been on the right track with my drawings, because my drawings, my art skills are a bit dodgy at best. I'm probably being hard on myself, but they need some brushing up. They need a lot of brushing up. But anyway, I loved how that went. I love that you can see the little ears out the side. Maybe I could have done something more with this front, but it was a technique I wanted to try, and I'm pleased with it. This was my scrap from Tanya. It was some chocolate wrapper. She'd stamped on it, so I just left it on there and just love how it turned out. And these were scraps from an earlier prompt that I just thought, let's use them. Why not? And for all my prompt responses, I have put a date stamp on them somewhere, or occasionally on the page. I think there might be one or two like that. But I wanted to have some way of knowing, okay, well, what prompt was it for? If you couldn't tell. And for some of them, I've used up little wee quotes on them, just because. Why not? A lot of my pages, in fact, I probably have to say all of my pages, I've got gold splatter on them, because I love gold. I'm definitely a gold girl. Love this paper. Love, love, love it. This was one of my prompts. I love this. And this was one where I forgot to add my scraps to. So they've been added later, and I've made a mini chocolate bar. Tanya had sent me some chocolate wrappers and some foils. So I've cut this one down. And I wanted to use it because it's not a chocolate that we get here in New Zealand. So I did want to keep it for that reason. But also because I thought, everyone loves chocolate. So I've got to have a little chocolate bar here. And this was my double paperclip response for the cheesy prompt. And so I made cheese, because, you know, it had to be cheese, and holy cheese. But it was mainly about this cheesy grin. And so I've cut through the teeth, which was a whole lot of complication there in terms of making sure that I had the teeth underneath as well, so that it wouldn't show, and it was frustrated me. But I love the end result. And so I also love this double paper clip. So I thought, oh yeah, that I'm going to have to try again. And then, as for this tuck, you can't resist that, can you? So there, and then I just wanted to remind myself that you can then use the other side of the paper clips as well. Don't forget about that. I mean, I could have stuck my chocolate in there, in the mouth, but, yeah. And this is one of the ones where I put the date stamp up here because I didn't want to detract from these lips. I think they're so luscious that, yeah, had to leave them showing in full. Envelope, which I decorated. I've got some of my homemade faux vintage tape. If you want to know more about that, there's videos in my playlist and videos in my channel, or leave a comment below and I can make another one and we can make up some colours and I can show you how I store it, and all that kind of good stuff, because it is wonderful and so useful. This is another one of my favourite pages. I love how this turned out. Again, another one of, yeah, I don't know if I could repeat it. This bit here I can, and I love doing that. So, if you want to know more, leave me a comment. But here you can see that stitching and my variegated thread. I always leave long dangles. I could maybe put something on the end, but nah. This was my Curiosity Shop one, and I've added a couple of dimensional, where are we, dimensional prompts. You can see that hand, it's quite dimensional, and the what is it, leaf is dimensional. But I mean, it was a whole lot of little wee things that I just had so much fun creating. I mean, these two were out of my stash. This one I did colour on the day, so to speak. These were all stamped images which I coloured with different mediums. That was what was fun about it. It was not necessarily the end result, but it was pulling out all my different materials and some that I haven't used for a while. Like I pulled out Neo colours, I pulled out coloured pencils, I pulled out my gelatos, I pulled out my distress crayons, all those things that I used back in the day when I was doing a lot of art journaling, but which, to be honest, are just sitting in my stash doing nothing. So it was good to pull these out, and hopefully that's going to inspire me to use them again, because that's what I want to do. This year, for me, is going to be about using all those products that I've got in my stash but that I haven't used for a while. Love this paper. That's the back of the envelopes. They were a gift from a swap, and so I've been holding on to them in my stash. I wanted to make sure I use them rather than just let them sit there doing nothing. This was the first prompt. It is a playing card and vintage keys. I love this idea of the charms hanging off the side of the page, creating a page tab, but in hindsight, maybe not keys, because I will tell you now, they have a tendency to catch as you're flipping the pages, and it may become a little frustrating if you're not a patient person, or you do run the risk of either like pulling this off and damaging the page or damaging one of the other pages. So, lesson learned. Think about what you're going to be using, and I mean, I would still do this in a heartbeat. I wouldn't change a thing, but I know now for future I need to think about things like this. I love the way this turned out. It's perfect as a side tuck, so you can put something in there. And I love this idea that you can see through the card and see what's underneath there. And that was what I wanted to get out of this, was to see, okay, let's make some kind of cool side tuck and add windows into things and do the unexpected. And then so my scraps up here are all of this, all the like the cluster items beneath the key there are scraps from Tanya. Here's some more of my homemade sellotape, stitching up the corner just to change like something from the normal rectangle page. Do something different, unexpected. Right, here's the back pocket of the first Braille page, and in here, this was one of my favourite prompts responses. This is Big Bad Bobo Rangy. He's a bad cat, selling catnip to all the little kitties. If you want to know his full story, then you must go and see his prompt. I just loved everything that came here. We've got witness statements. We've got little evidence folders. I've got an evidence list. And inside the pockets, I then have the second part of the prompt response, which was the label, apothecary labels. And so these are the labels for what he is buying and selling. He is selling catnip, but he's buying like cat's whiskers in exchange for the catnip. And yeah, it's a very sordid tale. Not for the faint-hearted. But you know, I loved it, and it was probably a glimpse into my weird mind and how it works. But I love this idea. It's a great way of putting in a whole lot of extra bits and pieces. Like you could put photos here instead of like printouts. You can write stories related to those photos. You could put your memorabilia or other little bits of ephemera in here, And it's surprising how much you can fit into a file folder like this that you can pull out, and then maybe you could put a whole lot of scraps in there that, you know, if you're giving this journal as a gift to, or you're giving a journal as a gift to someone, something like this has got so many possibilities that you can do from it. But sometimes we forget about something as simple as this. So, carrying on, because we're only at the first signature, and at this rate we're going to be here for a couple of hours. I mean, all these pages, there's just video upon video about how I made them. So now this one here, if I carefully take off my little wee paper clips, which are just the coolest little wee jandle paper clips, or flip-flop, or thongs, whatever you want to call them. We call them jandles here. And then this is holding on a hand-stitched, and this was the paper bag handles and hand-stitching prompt. Believe it or not, this bit here is from paper bag handles. Ours here are not folded. They are rolled up pieces of paper, which I found out when I pulled one apart. So I've flattened that out and then hand stitched them onto a very thin piece of, it was called cicada wing paper. I've then added in a whole lot of random scraps of paper. I mean, this was from Tanya. It's like tracing paper or vellum. This was some Hessian fabric. This was a tea bag that she dyed. This was vellum. And then this was a coffee, I don't know if it was might have been an actual coffee cup that had been dried, or it was like a coffee sleeve maybe. And then inside I've got, this is like part of that chocolate wrapper, but I just thought it provided just a little bit of extra strength for my envelope, because to be honest, it is really not what I'd call mail proof. But I loved the having, taking the time to do all the hand stitching on it. And it reminded me of a prompt I did, or a challenge I did a couple of years ago with Nick the Booksmith on her Deserted Island challenge. And I'd hand stitched my journal together for that. And this kind of reminds me of that. It was about using, again, whatever materials you've got in your stash and all those things that you've been collecting but didn't know what to do with. Like this stuff here is some of that shredded packing paper that you get, and I've been wanting to use that for goodness knows how long, so I finally got to use some, and I was really pleased with how it turned out, considering how dimensional it is. I've got like pages that I made up. This was a vintage music booklet. Absolutely loved it. This was a prompt on, what was it? This was the journaling card and beloved visitor. That was it. Right from the word go, I had this inspiration to create like a vintage style mailbox and calling cards, because I'm a huge fan of Bridgerton and read all the books last year, and I've just started rereading the books, and so I thought, why not make calling cards for my favourite characters. Penelope, Eloise, and even though she's not a favourite character, you know, Cressida. And this was a scrap that Tanya had sent me, and I thought, Queen of everything on my business card is Queen of Colour. That just seemed somewhat appropriate. So all I've done is corner round or chomp the corners with a like a vintage style corner cutter, and then I've inked them all so that they all have that kind of similarity, and then they all just tuck quite nicely into that mail slot and stay there. So this was a page that I got from a magazine. I think it was Daphne's Diary. I backed it onto coffee dyed paper because it wasn't very sturdy, and then sewed around it. I've stenciled onto the back and splattered it with gold ink. I tea-dyed all the front and the back as well, just to age it a little bit. So it was, you know, that's something that you can do with like modern book pages and modern magazine scraps, is, you know, come up with ideas of using them. So this was, again, in that Bridgerton sort of idea, MoxyMojo Milliner and Modiste from New Zealand. And here was, these were photos that came from a kit from Tailor-Made Journals. I think it was Edwardian set 3, 1 or 3. One of those two. And it was all, I picked out all the ladies in it with the hats because I just wanted to show off how gorgeous the fashion was. So I created this as almost like a shopping catalogue of fashions. And so like in here you'd have the various different prices written on so you knew how much things were. But like back in the era, a lot of effort was put into making the catalogues look just that little bit more beautiful, because it was made by hand or with a printing press or gestetner. So you wanted something to last, and so that's kind of where I was coming from, was I wanted something that was sort of timeless but of an era. And then so it's held together with the measuring tape that could have been used for measuring a lady to know, for instance, okay, well, what size hat would she need? So, yes, all sorts of ideas and concepts behind things. This one was my envelope flip and secret love letter. Now, my husband has told me time and time again that I needed to explain the meaning of my love letter. So, first of all, the flips. And these were a couple of envelopes that Tanya had sent me in last year, not necessarily with my Dephemerember swap, but she's an absolute godsend and just a truly special lady who has sent from time to time different packages and often sends me one or two, or okay, half a dozen or so stamps or stickers, and she puts them in these little wee envelopes. And so I wanted to recall her doing that, and she decorates them. So I've done nothing other than like ink around the envelope, and then I've like put the stickers on the back here, some of the different stickers. This was it's actually a table runner that I got from Temu, and so I've put that in. And then like I've just included a whole different range of envelopes. These are like stickers from, I got these from Susan Taylor Brown, her Poppiness digital site. I've got like scraps from Tanya, scraps from my colouring pages. I've got my date stamp there. And then I just wanted to flip it through, and like at various stages I've got like bits like this was a page that Tanya sent me, so I've made an envelope out of that. This was a doily that she sent, and so I've included like that in a couple of places. I've got stickers from Temu. This was an envelope that I designed using a kit I got from TaylorMade Journals of different art supplies. So as part of a guest design team for her, I made a whole lot of different pieces of ephemera. So I had those sitting in my stash, so I wanted to use them up. This is part of one of my scrap strips that I just wanted to actually start to use some of those instead of having them sitting in my stash. And there's another bit. And then this bottom envelope I've actually put in as a belly band so that I can tuck something else in there, as well as being able to put things in all of the envelopes like this one. And this is my final love letter and what my husband thinks I need to explain. So we've got the 831, which means 8 letters, 3 words, 1 meaning, which is I love you. And whenever I say to him I love you, he says to me, hate your guts, which is his way of saying I love you. And so if he says I love you to me, then I invariably say hate your guts to him. So it's our way of saying to the other I love you. So that's why we say hate your guts. So hence the secret mess love letter in my prompt, and indeed the title of that prompt. So if you were wondering why we say hate your guts, that's what it is. It's just something that we've been saying now for some time. Dare I say, several years now. And it's kind of like Patrick Swayze in Ghost, how he would never say I love you, he'd always say ditto. So that's kind of like what that is. My husband says hate your guts. So it's his fault, not mine. So this is my bookmark. It's supposed to be black and white, but as you can see, the oxide's rubbing off on it. And what I wanted to do with this is it's actually magnetized so it will stay there, because it's a big bugbear with me is that I don't like bookmarks because they never stay where they're supposed to. So when I saw this prompt, I wanted to find a way of solving that. My problem was that the magnets I was using were not strong enough to attract each other through multiple layers of paper and ink and embossing powder and everything else. But we found a way of solving that, and so now my magnetised bookmark works. And I have this little wee tassel hanging down the bottom so I can always find it whenever I want. Love this page. It's out flat. You can see the paint brushes, the paint splattering across the page, and then I followed the flow of the paintbrushes with my machine stitching, which I thought was really awesome. So now this was one of my favourites as well. Again, I did forget to put some scraps in there, so after the prompt was finished, this little wee monster here, my pocket monster, is eating the wrappings from some mushrooms and some tea that Tanya sent me. So it's supposed to be like a man's suit pocket, and you, from the front, all you can see is this what looks like a pocket handkerchief, but coming out are these little legs, and then when you actually go behind, the altered pocket is that the pocket base has become this octopus because it is eating all the toxic waste. And so that was what I wanted to do. So my wonderful octopus, which is hand-drawn and all the bits doodled, was made on double-sided photo paper, which I coloured on both sides, though I didn't do all my doodling on the back side, and I maybe should have done that. But I just love the way this came out, this effect, and I love that it's kind of like pop-up, although this tentacle is being held in place with a little wee mini paper clip. But I mean, this top layer is free and moving about, which I think is awesome. And no one has any idea, you know, kind of, you don't know what to expect behind here. And this is purely about just being a fun ephemera element, and not taking like journals or journaling or the art process too seriously. I mean, if you wanted to, you could use these loose tentacles as hidden journaling spots, but really it's just about creating something totally unexpected that will hopefully make you smile when you are looking through the journal. This is a sewing pattern that I have glued in half. So normally it flips out. So I've glued it in half. I've then stitched around each sort of quarter page, tea-dyed it all after I had stenciled on both sides. And I just love the effect that we've come out with. I did need to trim the sides so that it would fit, but all I did was just cut with some fancy scissors I've got. But to be honest, this was one of my easiest pages, and yet it looks so cool. This December. Oh, snippet roll and woven flowers, that's right. So I used, to make the flower petals, I used my scrap strips, which are strips of adding machine rolls, which I have decorated with like paints and crayons, and I've stenciled them and I've misted them and all sorts of decorations, stamped them. I took some strips of that, cut them into strips, and then wove a rectangle sheet of paper, which I then cut my petals out. So I've glued them onto like a backing page of coffee paper, and then hidden in the corner, or the point of the petals, I have added a little wee magnet. And then underneath the centre of the flower is a magnet that attracts them onto the page. So now my petals can be pulled off as hidden journaling spots, but they are attracted to stay on there and move about however you want. And I mean, if you wanted to, there's nothing stopping you completing the circle with flowers. I have got my scraps were from the butterflies that Tanya sent me, with a bit of thread underneath, and the leaves are again made from some of the scraps, from the snippet rolls rather, scrap strips. And then this circle was actually a circle that Tanya had included, I'm guessing from some kind of packaging. It had been die cut out, so I just did have to cut it a wee bit smaller. But yeah, I love the way that turned out. I just need to be careful with because I made them maybe just a smidge too big, but you know, maybe bigger is better. This was my photo frame and steampunk butterfly. I got photos from TaylorMade Journals. This was cardboard, and it was just recycled cardboard that I covered in some silver aluminium tape that was self-adhesive that I got from like the local emporium. I think it was like $2 a roll, something like that. And then I embossed it using some of my steampunk sort of style embossing folders. I cut out the butterfly shape, and then I cut out apertures in the wings so that my photos would show through. I've then adhered this onto the page, and I've added like various different sort of steampunk type charms. I've got cogs here, and I've got a little watch, I've got a clock winding key, I've got a couple of keys, and then this was a swirl of copper wire that I manually turned into the butterfly antenna. But I really, and like I forgot to mention, I alcohol inked the page, but I really do love the way that this turned out. It is, I have to admit, quite a heavy page, so it's not something you would do on any page. You do need to think carefully about where you put some ephemera. So these are my pocket letters and specimens. So I wasn't sure what I wanted to do for this prompt, but in the end I made like specimen cards, and you cut out like a square of various different things. I use like flowers and butterflies like you would as specimen items, but then I also put in a photo, and this was one, and both of them I've got there, were from Louisa's, one of her people kits. This one was about really using various different materials. Like this work, like for me it was going through and kind of testing the different materials and how did they you know, how did they work in this kind of a scenario. I mean, I'd never made specimen cards before, so that's what I wanted to do, was make a selection of them for me to say, well, yeah, okay, they are quite cool, but how would I use them? How do I go about decorating them? And then luckily I had a pocket to put them in, because I didn't know how I was going to store them in my journal. Book page and blackout poetry. Yes, that's what it was. So I made a pocket from a book page that I'd altered using inks, and then I found a poem on a book page, and I blacked it out using scraps of photo paper that I dyed for an earlier prompt response. And these were the scraps that I had left over, and I just tore them into strips and then used those as my blackout process. I did mistakenly glue over one word, so I managed to pull the paper off, but I did have to go over it because it had torn part of the print there. But I love I actually love the effect, even without the poetry, of this sort of decorative element on the envelope, and also carrying it onto the back. And then I use like a Jacob's ladder type fastening for this envelope to attach it to the page so that it could flip out, and then I've got effectively the whole page here to write on if I wanted to. And then as for my scraps from Tanya, she had given me this like faux invoice, so I wanted to keep that, so I thought that was cool. And she'd made these tickets and included them as a scrap, so I've put those in as well, and they just slot into my pocket to remind me that, yep, you can put anything in there. And I mean, that I can write on the back of that page, and it could effectively be hidden journaling tucked into this pocket. So now this was one of the ephemera that I just could not find a way. No, I did. I tell a lie, because that, Collect Beautiful Moments, that was from the stuff that Tanya sent me. That was all I managed. And underneath was part of the chocolate wrapper. But this was the least favourite ephemera in Bookbinder's art, because it's not my least favourite, it's the items that I use the least, and they are mini file folders. Even though I love them and I think they're really useful items, I forget to use them. They are the simplest of things to create. So again, just cut a rectangle piece of cardboard, fold it in half, cut one side to leave a tab, and there you are. Now I've rounded all the corners on these, and then I've added decorative elements on the front, and this is gold leaf that I've attached. This one was, I had like embossed these images using dry embossing. So you can see that more on this one. And then I actually painted over the dry embossing These two was the whole thing. This one was just part, because I thought, oh, I'm not going to do that one. And then I applied the gold leaf over the bit that I had painted the gold leaf sizing. And I love the way these turned out. I mean, you normally wouldn't get the oxide rubbing off onto them. It's just that page happens to have oxide sitting on it. But, I mean, that looks so smart. And, I mean, you could have this as a card. You could do all sorts of things based on this idea. And they take up such little space. They're a great way to slip in and give extra room. This was the last prompt, mixed media tag and urban graffiti. And this was probably one of the ones I was most determined to do. It was my ode to Banksy, or my homage to Banksy, I should say. And this is what I wanted to do right from the start. I mean, there's embossed, no, it's not embossed, it is stenciled texture paste through a stencil, and this was a very lightweight texture paste. I've then torn up scraps of cardstock to create these bricks and manually glued those on one at a time. I don't know if you can see them. There you go. So you can see the brick shapes in there. I've then hand cut my little girl and my heart. This was some cardboard that Tanya had sent me and a Easter egg wrapper that she'd sent, and I just flattened it out as much as I could and adhered it onto the cardboard, and that gave me my balloon. And I just love the simplicity of it, even though it did take quite some time. But yeah, gorgeous. This was, where are we, 3rd of December, the layered tag and retro film strip. And if I can sit my journal upright so you can see it a bit better. This is 3 tags of different sizes. And in between is the film strip. And you can just see it in there. And then what I wanted to do with this was show the 3 different stages. Whoops, if I move it across so you can see. 3 different stages of a rose, from a bud through to a full bloom. And so I actually did a freebie for this one, which you can get from my Ko-Fi or Ko-Fi or Coffee page, however you want to say it. And you get the tag bases, and then there's 2 options for the decoration. You can get either the roses, or there is 3 different mushrooms, or toadstools. I think they're mushrooms. So that you can get for free. All I've done is back them onto some craft card, and then I've decorated them with different scraps of fabric, different like tickets and numbers from my stash, and then like the stash tea bag was from Tanya. And so each of them got a bit of that tea bag, because I've never heard of the stash tea until Dephemerember 2023, when I think it was Louisa used some that Barbara had given her. And I made the comment to Tanya that, you know, I'd never seen that. And she can get it in Australia, so she sent me a wrapper of the stash towel. She's now sent me a couple, so I'm very spoiled. But I wanted to record that she'd sent that as, you know, and use that as part of one of my prompts. Now, in the back pocket here, as we finish this review, finally, you might say, is some of the extra calling cards I made. Colin and Lady Catherine. There's all sorts in there. Lady Danbury, Duchess of Hastings. So yes, definitely a Bridgerton fan. But in here I have included, so here's my prompt list. But inside this little wee book is my notes for what I was going to do. So this was all my prompt planning for each of the prompts. And so I went through and I've written out, okay, well, what type of ephemera was I making? What materials, tools did I need? Were there any specific techniques I wanted to do? And then my process so that I could even like include little wee sketches. That was my hidden altered pocket. That's my octopus legs. So yeah, previously I've used postcards which I've included on each prompt, but this I think was much better, a lot more compact, and given that it now fits in the back pocket, so long as I don't have it pushed too far in, is perfect way of having that at easy access, so that if I do have any questions as to how I created any of these prompt responses, I can easily refer back to the process that I followed. Now I do think I'm going to have to get some kind of a attachment to keep this closed, because it is starting to gator mouth just a wee bit, but I don't mind. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to put this in. I might have to fold it in half and put that in the back pocket as well, because I don't want to throw that away. But that is my completed journal, which took much longer to share with you than I thought. But I hope you enjoyed seeing the finished product. I absolutely loved making it. Will be shortly with a giveaway journal for reaching 500 subscribers. For joining me throughout Dephemerember. Thank you for joining me for this video, and I look forward to seeing you back in the studio. When it was out flat, you could see the paintbrushes,